Sudan. Now, tonight we have with us some sons of the Caribbean soil. And I tell you, hold on to your seats, guys. This is going to be amazing. We have with us Honorable Aubrey C. Norton. He's a leader of the opposition in Guyana and political leader of the People's National Congress Reform, the PNCR. Mr. Norton has served in numerous political roles, including presidential advisor and minister, since assuming leadership of the PNCR in December 2021. He became opposition leader in April 2022. He's a fierce advocate for electoral reform, equal representation, and government transparency in Guyana. Please welcome to the Marcia Week Show, Honorable Aubrey Norton. Welcome back, Mr. Norton.
Good evening, and thanks for having me. And a very good evening to your viewing and listening audience.
It's a pleasure having you, sir. And I know we're in for a treat tonight. And we also have with us, guys, oh my goodness, I met this gentleman in Dominica. And joining us is Dr. Thompson Fontaine. He's a political leader of the United Workers' Party, the UWP, Dominica's main opposition party. Dr. Fontaine is a former IMF economist, university lecturer, and international development expert. He served as head of strategy for the Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Commission in South Sudan, overseeing the country's peace agreement implementation. He holds a PhD in financial and international economics and is the author of The Maroons of Dominica, 1764 to 1818. The name of that book is Resistance, Rebellion, and Freedom from Slavery. Listen, audience, please welcome, join me in welcoming Dr. Thompson Fontaine for the first time to the Marcia Week Show. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. I say very good evening to you as well, and to Honorable Norton. It's good to be in your company. It's good to be in the program tonight, and to your listeners as well.
Glad to be in your company as well.
You guys have ever met before?
No, it's the first time, but it won't be the last. I can guarantee. I'm sure we'll definitely.
Listen, we need to bring the Caribbean together. You know, I know the airfares are very high, but you know, but at least we can meet virtually. I'm in Barbados. You're in Dominica, and Honorable Norton is in Guyana. But we've got to come a bit closer. Well, tonight we're going to do that in discussions, right? Because we are talking essentially tonight. We are talking about elections, rigged or real, the truth about elections in the Caribbean. Tonight, we tackle an issue that strikes at the very heart of democracy, electoral integrity in the Caribbean. It's no secret that in recent years, questions have been raised in Barbados, Guyana, Dominica about the fairness of electoral processes all over the Caribbean. Are elections rigged? Is this something that those that didn't win, that they complain that, oh, something went wrong with the elections, they're rigged? Or are they rigged? Is the system designed to ensure that one party remains in power indefinitely? Are voters' lists padded? Is the number of registered voters exceeding the actual population in some countries? And what about campaign financing? Who is really watching the money trail? Tonight, we are joined with political and opposition leaders from two countries who are willing to speak boldly, honestly, and urgently on this matter. We want to get to the truth. And we're going to go right to, we're going to go over to Guyana. I love Guyana. I love Dominica too. I want to ask Mr. Norton, sir, jumping right in. What's your response to persistent concerns in Guyana about voter padding?
Let me say good evening again.
Yes, sir.
I believe Guyana is probably the clearest case of voter padding. Guyana has a population of 750,000, and the voters list is 727,000 people. At the same time, the government says that it gives out cash grants to school children, and there are about 220,000 school children.
Okay, so let's pause right there so we understand what you're saying. So your population is your voter population is 750,000, you're saying?
No, the national population,
The national population.
750,000 at the last census.
Yes.
But the voters list that came out recently has on it 727,000 Guyanese. The school population is estimated to be 220,000 Guyanese. And if that is true, it means logically that, let's put it at 250. The maximum your voters list should be is 500,000.
500,000, yeah.
Yeah, like I said, it is. And even that is high because the school population, there are a lot of children between 16 and 18 who are not at school, and they are not counted. So if you add those, it will be much less. But the reality of Guyana is we have a voters list that is 700,000 plus. It seems to me a mathematical impossibility.
So you basically you are about what's this, about 200,000 more than what it is supposed to be. There's 200,000, yeah, about 200. So, where, in terms of this padding, where the people coming from?
Now, the problem is this, during the confusion in the last election, when the opposition, then now government, filed an action against house-to-house registration, which we had to stop, and the judge ruled that you cannot take people off the list. Now, we have said to the government that we are prepared as the opposition to work with you, change the legislation so we can clean the list. And we also demanded the addition of biometrics as another safeguard. The government refused. The government refuses to do so, and it seems axiomatic why they would have done that. They would do that because they're the government, and it suits them to have a bloated list. And so that's the reality on the ground.
Wow. Well, you know, on that, I know that Mr. Thorne isn't here. We got a message, as I said earlier, that he wasn't well. We wish him all the best and that he will recover quickly. But I know that in Barbados here, that just given the Barbados perspective, seeing that Mr. Thorne isn't here, we were told by the Prime Minister at our last by-election in St. James North that the voters list in St. James North was over by what, 2,000 people, more than it is supposed to be. That's what we were told. And if we have 11 parishes, well, we have, don't forget parishes, constituencies. We have 30 constituencies. If we start to multiply that, we could be about 50 or 60,000 over as well. It is quite interesting. But let's bring Dr. Fontaine in this discussion. Dominicans have seen reports of voter bribery and manipulation. What's the reality on the ground there, Dr. Fontaine?
Yes, thank you for this question. And I'm listening to Honorable Norton, and I'm thinking how similar we are here in Dominica. We have a population probably 1/10 of the size of Guyana, of roughly 70,000 people. Yet our voters list is 74,380 persons. So we have more than the natural population. And there's a reason for that. The reason why our voters list is bloated and contains the names of individuals. Quite frankly, we've had a serious migration problem in Dominica. So thousands of those individuals live overseas. The past 3 election cycles, our government, which is the Dominican Labour Party, has been able to go into that group of individuals who are living overseas and who, according to our legislation, would not have ordinarily qualified to vote, because our laws are very clear that you have to be within the jurisdiction for at least 3 months within the 5-year cycles. You have individuals who have been away for more than that, prolonged periods, yet every time there is an election, our government goes overseas and literally bribes people, brings them in, offers them a free chartered ride from New York or Miami or via ferry from the neighboring French islands, get them into Dominica and give them $500 or $1,000 to vote. And these individuals overwhelmingly vote the Labour Party, and they've been able to sustain themselves in office that way. And that is the situation we have in Dominica.
Wow. But on this voter padding, hold your question there. I know I asked a specific question, but this is quite interesting. I see Pedro is saying in Barbados, and we're trying to keep the Barbados perspective here in the absence of Mr. Thorne, that it would be 50 or 60 over. The aim is 80,000, because we're trying to increase our population in Barbados. So it causes us to wonder where are these people coming from. Is it just dead people who are on the list, or what? And there's a question from Mr. Norton that people are asking if the 200,000, if they're Venezuelans.
Well, there are some Venezuelans on the list. Guyana has a law which says that if one of your parents was born in Guyana, then the children can become citizens. And so there are those who are entitled to citizenship. But there are also those who the government put in remote areas and give them ID cards so that they can vote. Now, they should not be here legitimately. Another group that the government utilizes, there's a Commonwealth rule. The rule says that if you're from a Commonwealth country and you live continuously for 1 year in Guyana, you can vote. Now, what you have in Guyana is that they have removed all the restrictions on getting a birth certificate. So a leader in a community could sign and say, you're X or Y, and you can get a birth certificate. And then they place the brother of a minister as head of the registrar. And so what happens is that a lot of people are getting birth certificate and consequently ID card because of the government's manipulation of that process. Previously, you had to go through a more strict process to confirm that you had lived in Guyana for the year continuously and that kind of thing. Now you don't have to do that. What you have is you could come from any country and you could get any leader in an Amerindian community, any community. And once that leader is favorable to the government, then they will accept the signature and that person will get a birth certificate and they become entitled to vote. So there's abuse of the 1 year Commonwealth rule in the society.
Yes, I see. Wow. Oh my goodness. So let me get back to Dr. Fontaine about voter bribery and manipulation. I mean, you just spoke a little bit about that, as you know, when with those that are brought in, that you're alleging that are brought into Dominica. But what about is there voter bribery among those who live in Dominica? Do you see that a lot? Is that a reality for you, voter manipulation of the actual people who live in Dominica?
Yes, absolutely it is. I mean, I saw it with my own eyes. I contested the elections in 2014 here in Dominica, the only time I did. And I saw right there on the voters line, I saw individuals from the Labour Party literally giving cash to persons right on the voters line. So it's not
Giving
something
cash,
that
you send cash?
giving cash, you know, putting money into the hands of individuals who are waiting in line to vote. I saw that personally, and I know that a number of persons have been bribed, given envelopes. They give them little red envelopes and so on. We have also been told that in the 2019 election, persons went straight from voting into the offices of the Labour Party where they were given envelopes for voting. And they had to show evidence. So people brought in their cameras into the voters' booth, took pictures of their vote, and went to collect money. We have all of those evidence. A lot of that we've been able to chronicle and document and put that up as petitions. But, you know, our legal system has failed us terribly in Dominica. Thankfully for us, we were able to get a viewing by the Caribbean Court of Justice in 2019. And in 2022, they had some very strong opinions about the elections in Dominica, where they opined that elections in Dominica should not take place under these continuous states. They were convinced with the evidence that there was bribery, that there was cheating, that there was the importation of voters, and that the whole election system in Dominica was
just a minute there, Dr. Pontin. I think it's important for you to slow that down a bit, because this is not your opinion. This is coming from where? The external body. Repeat the external body.
So we have two sets. Every election cycle, we have the election observers. So we have election observers from the OAS, we have from CARICOM, we have from the Commonwealth, and they've always said that every single election observer team in Dominica have always observed that the elections are neither free nor fair. They've said that repeatedly. But for the first time, the Caribbean Court of Justice, this panel of distinguished Caribbean jurists, they were able to look at the evidence that we provided through our petitions, our election petitions, some of which were dismissed by the courts in Dominica. But having taken a look at the evidence, the affidavits of persons who said, yes, I was given money, the affidavits of the list of persons we knew who were not qualified to vote and who were coming from the United States and elsewhere, they had a chance to look at this. And they were of the firm opinion that the evidence was credible and that Dominica's election is flawed, the process is flawed, and that they opine that elections should not be held in Dominica under these detaints that they observed. Unfortunately for us, our government completely ignored this opinion, which came out in 2022, July of 2022, and our government called a snap election in complete defiance of the CCJ, a snap election in December of that year, which we boycotted. And that's the reason why I'm just the leader of the United Workers' Party and not the leader of the opposition even, because our party decided to, as a last desperate attempt to get electoral reforms, that we had to boycott those elections, and that is what we did.
Yes.
And in the process, our fight for electoral reform has led to the arrest of several of us. Personally, I've been arrested 3 times. I've been jailed as a result of that, of the process that we've gone through. You know, but it's a process that we have been fighting and going through in Dominica, and it's because our government has decided, and our Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit has decided, and he has said so repeatedly on numerous occasions, that he was going to be in office until 2050. So it looks like he's doing everything 2050, because 50. He came into office at the age of 32, and he's been there for the past 25 years. So he feels that he has this entitlement to remain in office, and he's been able to utilize our police offices, our police force, weaponize the police force against the people of Dominica. He's been able to politicize the judiciary so that when we try to get redress, all our pleas go unheeded. And so that's the situation that we have in Dominica. And we've tried to bring, our plight to the international community. We've written to every organization we can think of, human rights organizations, political organizations. We've written to CARICOM. We've done everything possible, humanly possible. We've put our own freedoms on the line to protest against what is going on in Dominica. And eventually, we got some reforms recently But those reforms, we in our mind does not go far enough,
Right.
because
They're just, but let me just bring we're going a little bit off script, but I'm watching Mr. Norton's expression, as you should have seen him how he was looking at you, Dr. Fontaine. I want to ask Mr. Norton, have you ever heard of this happening? What he's describing, that it happened in Dominica? Have you heard about this before?
I will add some more for Guyana. Guyana is similar and probably worse.
But before you add the Guyana part, right? Did you know that this was what they were dealing with in Dominica?
Yes, I follow Caribbean politics, and I've seen the comments. I try to look at all the political systems in the Caribbean, and so I have an idea. I won't claim to know the details, but generally I know throughout the Caribbean, there's a certain level of unhappiness with electoral systems. Here in Ghana, it's no different. In fact, I think it's worse. First, we have a government that instills fear. In this process, we are now in the election cycle, and you have to get signatures to support your candidates. Mm-hmm. And the government is busy saying on the ground that if you sign for the opposition, then you're not likely to get contracts. If you're working with the government, your work is in trouble. So that is one. While he was speaking, I put down some others. The manipulations you talk about are here. And because Guyana is a large country geographically, mm-hmm. though we have operatives in all 10 regions, the vastness of the country constitutes a barrier when it comes to being able to scrutinize the election all across the country. And those loopholes are taken by the government of Guyana to bring people over the borders. People from Suriname come into Region 6, Corriverton area. People from Brazil come into Letem in the Rupununi. And so there is that. The government has access to resources. Wealth is now playing a role in terms of subjugating our system. In the last local government elections, there was open bribery of members of the electorate. Right now, as we speak, in one of our strongholds, Linden, the government goes in and distributing contracts in a way that allows them to intimidate people and say, we're giving you $9 billion in contract, and if you don't vote for us, those contracts are in trouble. And since you're giving it close to the election, it means a lot of them will be done after the election. So that also constitutes a mechanism for instilling fear. So apart from bribery, this whole thing of instilling fear. In Guyana, it is worse because the police force is compromised. The head of the police force is a political appointee who has no shame in being political. And what you see in this period is a lot of harassment of our support base using the Guyana police force. Worst among them is the Cybercrime Act, where you will have PPP people making all kind of remarks online, and the government wouldn't charge them. But once our supporter says anything online, you guarantee the next day the police is by you with some cybercrime.
I wanted to break to there because we have, Dr. Fontaine. I'm going to do my best because I know the Bajans are going to want me to make sure that you all know what we're going through here as well. But there is, a cybercrime bill that, had passed 2 stages, the lower house, upper house. We've been able to, do some advocacy and marches and all kinds of things, and it went to a joint select committee. And we felt that it was going to be used politically as Mr. Norton is speaking of in Guyana. That's what we saw happening. And only recently, we are now told that they're creating this hotline. And they're saying to people, if you notice that someone puts out a post that, it's fake news, or it's it's I forgot the term that they use, that you are to call this number and report it. So they didn't get very far with the cybercrime bill, because we took it all the way to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights in Washington. So now they're seeking to come a different way. And I hope Bajans are listening to what these two gentlemen are saying to us tonight, because I believe that we are being set up, Barbados. This is where we are going. It's the same playbook. I hope we are listening very, very clearly. But I want you kind of touched on it, Mr. Norton. You spoke about you went into a bit talking about voter manipulation and bribery and so on. But what about race? Has there been any racial or regional manipulation of voter data or electoral boundaries? And we're going to get to Mr. Fountain after this. But has there been racial or regional manipulation of voter data or electoral boundaries?
In the local government elections, there were some manipulations. But because we are a proportional representation system, boundary manipulation won't play the role it plays in a first past the post system like yours. Mm-hmm. So there is not that heavy bit of manipulation as it relates to boundaries in the national elections. But there are some other things they do that contribute. Only recently we had to say to the chief elections officer that, look, you cannot allow the governing party to put people with a tent in front of polling station. What they do is every election, they will put up tents with their people in the polling station. And of course, they know who are passing to vote and who didn't vote. And if they didn't, you can go and intimidate them and get them to vote. Our situation is much worse because our elections commission is compromised. The elections commission was set up in this way: 3 from the government, 3 from the opposition. And before the present elections commission chairman, Justice Claudette Singh, what the chairman did was play the role of conciliator and try to get the parties to find common ground and a consensus. She has changed that. Every decision that has been made since the 2020 election, she voted with the government. So there is no independent electoral commission anymore. GCOM, the Ghana Elections Commission, is a creature right now of the government.
So let me ask you something, because I just making sure I understand. I thought that it would be made up of, some from the government and probably 3 from the government, 2 from the opposition. I think that's how it's done in Barbados and probably in my understanding in Dominica. There's nobody from the opposition on.
Yes, there are 3 from the opposition and 3 from government. But the decisions are made by a simple majority, and the chairman of the Elections Commission votes with the government. So every decision, regardless of how rational or irrational it is, once it comes from the government, it is voted for. And that is why we have been consistently calling on the government to let us have a new election commission chairman, one that is prepared to understand the nature of Guyana and be more of a conciliator, a finder of consensus rather than an arbiter. She is an open, malicious arbiter. She makes no bones about it. If you know there's going to be a decision tomorrow, you can go to sleep and rest assured when you wake up tomorrow, she is going to vote with the government. They have appointed in a very partisan way the chief elections officer, the deputy, all of them are controlled by the People's Progressive Party in government. And so Guyana has really and truly a completely authoritarian society, if one doesn't want to carry it to the ultimate to say it's a dictatorship. But it shows all the signs. You mentioned the question of ethnicity.
Yes.
Ethnicity plays a role in Guyana. But I do think the government's marginalization and ostracization of most people will contribute in some slight changes. But the fact is, Guyana is an ethnically divided society. And unless you are cognizant of that and manage the society in a fair way, there will be problems. There are those who argue clearly that the society discriminates in every fashion. You are there. If you go online and see the Guyana newspapers, and when they are given major contracts, not telling you when they're going in African village and give them pittance, when they're given a $900 million contract, a $800 million contract, they are all from one ethnic group. And one has to understand that Guyana, though we talk about private enterprise, it's a state-dominated society in which most of the resources are allocated by the state. And so there is no civil society that is independent. You have a state-controlled, totalitarian type society. We have had cases in Guyana where the government took away sponsorship from a newspaper and the newspaper in trouble and have to toe the line because they use that power and wealth at their disposal to manipulate the system and ensure that they instill fear, create these barriers, so in the final analysis, they hope to prevail.
Wow.
What will save us this time is their incompetence and the fact that they're alienating a lot of their own support base.
Yes. Wow. I am telling you this. Oh my goodness. Listen, Dr. Fontaine. Oh my goodness. I want to. I know you're listening keenly. I'm so happy that we're coming together as one region and hearing our woes and listening to Mr. Norton. I'm hearing Barbados in there as well. But Dr. Fontaine, can you tell us why has it been so difficult to implement electoral reform? We hear you and we hear the need for it. You've just said that they have just done something. It's nowhere near what is needed. Why has it been so difficult to do comprehensive electoral reform in Dominica?
A big part of the reason is what Honorable Norton just referred to, the Electoral Commission. All of that is supposed to be directed by the Electoral Commission, and the Electoral Commission is supposed to be an independent body. But we have the exact same problem here in Dominica. It is 3-2, 3 of them appointed by the government, 2 appointed by the opposition, and the chairman, of course, is appointed by the government. Now, every single commissioner on that Electoral Commission, they are passport agents. And you probably don't have that in Guyana, but in Dominica, we have a passport selling program where our passports are sold overseas for $200,000. And every single one of those commissioners are passport agents. And so they are protecting their turf. They're protecting the fact that they have to keep selling passports. And therefore, they are operating on the behest of the government. So whereas, for example, a lot of progress could have been made if we had an independent commission, then all of that is set aside. So the government of Dominica, after a lot of pressure, they hired a jurist, the former head of the CCJ, to actually do the recommendations for electoral reforms. And at the end of the day, after spending close to over $700,000 to get those reforms, to get the draft legislation that he prepared, at the end of the day, all of that was set aside. And the government decided that it would do its own thing. And its own thing with an eye on ensuring that it maintains as much of the status quo as possible. Because that is their ticket to victory. It's not because they are more popular than us in Dominica. It is not because they've done anything to build the country over 25 years that they have to point to, but they focus almost exclusively on elections and remain in office because they know that the minute that they open up to a free and fair election, they're gone. So their way of protecting their legacy, as they call it, what I refer to as a cheating legacy, is to ensure that they have these rigged elections and to ensure that even when they do reforms, it is a half measure. And I'll give you another classic example of this. Within the legislation that we now have is an important clause that states that the Prime Minister, notwithstanding that he begins the process of confirmation, you need to confirm your name. So we have a process where you will do confirmation. If your name is already on the list, you simply have to say, yes, that is me, whether you've been overseas for 40 years. And then once you confirm your name, you remain on the voter list and therefore can vote. So the whole residency criteria is gone. It is no longer viable. It's nothing about residency. It is about whether or not you're on the list. So that is the legislation that has been put forward. But importantly, the legislation also allows that if within the 12 months of the confirmation period, that he can call an election. And the list that will obtain is the same old bloated voters list. So we are on tenterhooks here in Dominica, expecting at some point of a snap election. So we may very well have another election cycle where we have the old list and the whole problem of reforms, the whole struggle that we've gone through, all of the arrests, all of the abuse that we've taken as an opposition would have been all for naught because we have a really bad piece of legislation.
Oh my
Should I also point out that, like Dominica, after the last election, every observer group said that we should not go to elections without rectifying the voters list.
Wow, you're talking when you say observer group, because sometimes
international observers,
international, because somebody might say,
if you go to the CARICOM report, it says that. If you go to the Carter Center report, it says that. If you go to the European report, every one of the reports bemoan the fact that the list is a problem. And the government knows the list is a problem. Let me tell you why. The government did a census since 2023. And they are refusing to release the census. In fact, our information is that they tried instructing the Stats Bureau to make changes, and they didn't do it. So what you have is the government holding on to the census, and the people of Guyana still operating, I think, by the 2001 census that says 750,000 people. Now, the rate of migration in Guyana is very high, from Guyana is very high. And we think that a lot of Guyanese would have left since then, but the government refuses to release the census. So no one knows what is the actual population in Guyana. That's a reality.
Wow, they're determined to hold on to power. By the way, when is elections in Guyana? Has it been announced?
The 1st of September.
The 1st of September. And for Fontaine, it's not yet. You're feeling it in the air, but you don't know.
We don't know when. Announced. Constitutionally, it is actually due in March of 2028.
The date has been set, the 1st of September.
For Guyana, but in Dominica.
Yes. Dominica, okay. Sorry.
No, for Dominica, it is really at the fancy and the women fancy of the Prime Minister. You can call it at any time when he thinks we are not ready, or as soon as he gets his machinery in place to bring down his voters. And I saw a comment from one of your listeners who said, "But why do the people keep voting them in?" But that is the problem. A rigged election means you don't necessarily need the support of the majority of the people on the island.
Well, say that again. Say that again, because I want Barbadians to listen. Folks, I want you, as you're listening, even though we do not have that Barbadian representation on here tonight, political representation, I mean, I want you to listen carefully and begin to compare and look at what is happening in Barbados, and also think of the possibilities based on who we have there in government, okay, and those who want to hold on to power. Think about that. And I want you to keep liking and sharing. I can look and I see what's going on. You know, they don't want this information, and it's a battle we have every night with these sycophants on here. So we need you from Dominica, share up the live, from Guyana, share up the live, Barbados. You know what to do already. We are fighting them. They do not want you here, Barbados. They don't want you to hear this. They do not want you to hear this tonight. Continue, Dr. Fontaine.
Yeah, so I was making the point that it is not a question of people voting them back. If you have a population that is so economically deprived, and on election time they're given bribes, they will vote. They will most likely vote for you. You know, because they're bribed into voting. And our people in Dominica have this very, very humbling and honest streak. And vote after voter has told me, if I accept the bribe, I feel compelled to vote for them. Okay, so you have that aspect of it. And you have the other aspect of persons coming in. I mean, if I'm offered $1,000, I leave New York in the morning, I go down, I vote, and I'm back in New York the same night, and I'm $1,000 richer, I will, you know, without a compunction of what's going on, I will do it. And that's exactly what has been happening. So it does not mean that the government is popular or they're winning. The only reason why they're rigging is because they cannot trust a level playing field. That is why you rig. If you're so sure of winning, why rig the election? Okay, so it's not a question of the government being popular and the overwhelming majority of people voting for this government. It's a question of suppressing the vote. It's a question of using every means possible to ensure that they remain in office. It is illegal, it is wrong, it is immoral.
Wow, and your prime minister has been in office for how long?
The party since 2000, so that's 25 years, and he as the prime minister since 2004. So he's been here for 21 years. Two prime ministers before him died in that 4-year period between 2000 and 2004. We lost two prime ministers, and he inherited as a third, and then he's been there for 21 years.
Oh my goodness. Oh my Lord. Let me ask Mr. Norton, what reforms would you implement to rebuild trust in Guyana's electoral process? If you had the all the resources and you know everything at your disposal, what reforms would you implement to rebuild trust in Guyana's electoral process? And also, can you tell us what is the in terms of the percentage? I forgot the term that is used. Voting of the voting population. What's the percentage that vote in Guyana? I'm forgetting the term that is used. Yes, go right ahead. The voter turnout. Thank you.
Before I actually touch the question, I want to give my colleague from Dominica some advice. We have a similar situation, but from the time I became leader in 2021, I've been saying to the Guyanese people, take the money and vote what you believe is right. Vote for us. And if you carry such a campaign, it might help. I do agree with you. This government does it as well. They ensure people stay in poverty, so they become dependent, and therefore they can manipulate. But let me now go to the question of the problem is deeper than electoral reform. One of the problems is political culture. We come out of a history of domination. We got independence, but the culture of domination continues. We have not developed a culture of finding compromise and consensus. So while constitutional reform will help, if there isn't the attitudinal metamorphosis, if there isn't the change in the political culture, there'll be problems. Now, I think Sir Arthur Lewis, in one of his books on West Africa, gave us the solution a while back, but it is not easy to get it in this part of the world. He virtually said, every decision that affects a section of the society, that section of the society should have a say in it. Now, we inherited a Westminster system, which is premised on some assumptions out of England that do not exist in the Caribbean. We, for instance, there ain't gonna be any big debate over the budget. The government brings the budget, They put it and they pass it just like that. Now, if you do the reform and you could bring what is called weighted voting, Professor might know about weighted voting in consociational systems, in which, as opposed to passing the budget with 51%, you have to pass it with, say, 60 or 2/3. What that means is that government is compelled to engage opposition to get a budget that reflects the society. Unfortunately, the downside of that is that it can produce gridlock. But there has to be some amount of constitutional reform to ensure that the resources in the society are allocated in a much fairer way.
Okay.
You can change all the laws. If the country continues to be a country in which by a one-seat majority, like we always get in recent times, they can exclude sections of the society, then you will have the same problems. Because in post-colonial states like Guyana and those in the Caribbean, one of the most important definitions of politics is the authoritative allocation of resources, in which the state has the authority to allocate the resource. And if the state can do it with a simple majority, it is not obligated to allocate resources so it is fair across the country. And that's one of the big problems in Guyana. How do we change the law to ensure that all sections of the society can benefit equally from the state allocation of resources? And so a lot of times when people talk constitutional reform, they look at the legal corpus, but fail to look at the economic basis. And in large measure, a lot of things that happen in the political base are determined by the economic decisions you make.
Yes.
One of the reasons people seek to clutch on and stay in power is because as government, you have the authority to allocate resources, and you allocate it how you feel. If there is a change in the system to result in a much more equitable economic distribution, then you have the basis for a state that is fair. Now, in Guyana's context, at the institutional level, they have compromised every institution that is supposed to be independent. Be it the Guyana Police Force, the Public Service Commission, on our Teacher Service Commission. I oppose the government putting 2 people that are known PPP activists, and therefore they have no basis to be objective. And so a lot of the decisions that are made by the commissions in Guyana are made in keeping with the diktat of the government. And so these institutions that are supposed to be a counterbalance to executive power are now brought in line with executive power and actually carrying out the mandates. We just had this case of Adriana Young.
Yes, and but our condolences, please. We did that we are sending our condolences to you and the entire Guyana. We showed some pictures at the beginning of the show.
Thanks. But let me say this. I want to raise this case. Here is a simple case of the reporting of a missing child. And rather than the Guyana Police Force investigate, they began to protect those who were accused of the crime. And in a matter as dangerous as this, they hold the person for a short period and then lose them. And so you do not have a police force that is operating to enforce law and order. We have a case where a person is now going to run, a man named Mohammed, who was close to the PPP, would have fallen out with the PPP. And what happened? Before, the police were saying they had no information, the evidence didn't point in this direction. Now, I'm not saying the man is guilty or not. But now that the man declares he's going to be a candidate in the election, the government is now saying they have information to charge him.
Wow.
Now, in any democratic sane society, the president and the vice president should have been facing the full force of the law, because it means that you had information, you knew of the crime, you were complicit in the crime, and only when the person is a challenge to you, you now decide you are going to prosecute them. And so when you look at the Adriana Young case, you see a clear situation where the government, the police, they were protecting the person who this allegation was against. And this is most interesting. There were 2 previous allegations of the same kind. And you would see the commander in the area providing false information saying this child left the hotel in a red Ram vehicle. Couldn't produce any videos. And the police then come to say, oh, they were misinformed. Now, you were the person in charge of these CCTV cameras. And I'm telling you this to make another point just now. You're in charge of these CCTV cameras, and you give this false information. So that even if you do the constitutional reform, you have to reform the entire Guyana police force. We have had too many cases where there are cameras and the evidence should be easy to collect, and the police fails to collect it. But any petty crime undertaken by common people, these cameras work. Wow. And you got to pick up a little
all of a sudden they work.
But murderers, high-end criminals, these cameras don't work. The point I make in here is that even if you have constitutional reform, but you don't have the independence and quality services like the police service, then you still will be in the same place, because corruption has caused Guyana to become a place where there is no rule of law. And when there is the rule of law, is the rule of law for the rich at the expense of the poor. I give you one last classic case of Guyana.
Yes, and then we go to Dr. Fontaine.
Okay, well, go and then I can.
But then, right, don't lose it, because I know he's ready to go. Don't make sure you write down that thought there. But Dr. Fontaine, I want to talk about campaign financing. In Dominica, is there any accountability in place for campaign financing?
There is none whatsoever. And our new legislation, it is also absent. So the government did not do anything about campaign finance reform. So it is open season. They have deep pockets. They have the resources of the state. They've shown in the past their willingness to use those resources, and they figure, well, in the absence of campaign finance reform, that's another disadvantage to the opposition. So that's where we are, none whatsoever. And the government has been unrestrained in the spending. I talked about having to charter. You might imagine the millions of dollars it costs to charter planes. When we had the hard evidence in the 2009 general election, at that time it was $14 million that they spent to bring people in through charters, several charters from the United States, and so on. And we suspect that probably doubled in the 2019 general election. So that's where we are. Absolutely no reforms, no campaign finance reform.
So even
notwithstanding, it was a major recommendation by Sir Byron.
Mm-hmm. And nothing there. So you're saying they have deep pockets. So is it just, you believe, from government resources, or is there do you guys believe there's some other country that is doing it, or where is this money coming from?
No, as far as we know, there is no other country that is supporting this behavior here in government. Neither are there any wealthy individuals from overseas financing the government. We have reason to believe, given the way our CBI revenues are being handled, and the lack of transparency, we believe that a lot of that money is channeled through to the electoral process. And that's one of the reasons why we currently have the government in court over the CBI revenues and their use and lack of reporting and lack of transparency and accountability.
So tell me, let's be a little clearer. So you're saying that the selling of these passports, you're thinking that you're alleging that the money some of that money, campaign financing, could be coming from that source?
Absolutely. Because at the very heart of it, the money is not coming through a consolidated fund as is mandated by our constitution. You have a series of agents, some of them local, but the vast majority live in high lives in Dubai and elsewhere, and they have control over those resources. Okay, so it's very easy for them to sell those passports and give whatever they want to the government for use of those things because the monies are not being accounted for. So we know that they have this huge pot of resources. How else do you explain being able to bring in those charters? And during election time, you're able to bring in Burna Boy and all these big reggae artists and all of these major artists from Africa.
So you bring in artists too, because listen, Barbados, listen to what Dominica is saying.
Top of the line,
Burna Boy and so on. You bring in Burna Boy for elections?
Yes, absolutely. They've done all of that. They've done all of that. So that is where we are in Dominica. It is very, very. It's a very difficult situation because we are faced with that situation of not getting campaign finance reform in the legislation and having to deal with this really corrupt government. And I'm just shaking my head because when I listen to Honorable Norton, I see, well, that's exactly what we have in Dominica. It's amazing, the similarities. It's like they're playing literally from the same playbook.
Wow, this is. I am totally intrigued. Barbados, are you listening? Are you listening, Barbados? I am totally intrigued by what you are saying because we see a similar pattern that has happened and is happening in Barbados, where these big name artists they're brought in, and the opposition is not able to do that because they just don't have those deep pockets. But let me hear, Mr. Norton. I know you weren't finished. You were talking about corruption and constitutional reform and how difficult it is to change, to bring that trust back to the trust in the electoral process, back to the people of Guyana. You weren't finished speaking about that, but I saw you wrote down something about campaign reform, campaign financing. So you're on the floor, sir.
All I was going to say is that we have the same thing here. It takes different forms. For instance, they will give contracts. And when they give contracts, a percentage goes to the government. Of course, some goes into private pockets. So the government is always well equipped with money to run a campaign. I must tell you, we had Burna Boy last year.
Wow.
There is what I call a kind of psychological warfare on the African Guyanese youth, where they bring these artists. And I have no problem with artists in themselves. But when you feed the people a culture of that kind of entertainment all year round, what you're doing is eroding, first of all, your culture, because you're not having these cultural performances that reflect your culture.
Yes.
And you are also pointing your youth out to the country. You are also pointing your youth to some of the most lawless music around. And mind you, I'm a lover of reggae music. I'm a lover of all music. But if you promote certain artists, then in that process, what you are doing is promoting a culture that might not necessarily be in the best interest of our society. And so I don't see them bringing them as only for political purposes. It is also an attempt to control psychologically the mind of young people, remove from them the ambition and the stick-to-itness that is needed for them to pursue professional and other careers. Look, the people who bring the artists make money on it, and I have no problem with that. But we also, as a society, we have to ensure that the artists we bring do not contribute to a moral degeneration. And a lot of times, that seems to be the focus. And when you're in an ethnically divided society like Guyana is, and you do that with the African Guyanese community, you are also generating problems and possibly putting people in psychological slavery in some regard. So one has to see it in context. The coming of an artist is not an issue. It is the type of artist you bring, what you are promoting in the society, and those are the things that matter. So I would say to you, I see no harm in artists visiting, but I see a problem when you select the worst of artists, the worst of music, and you make that the normal diet in the society. As it relates to campaign financing, not under this government in Guyana. They don't like rules. Look, this government doesn't like rules and regulation at all. Let me give you one.
That sounds like the motley. It sounds like you're describing the motley government.
Let me say this to you. We had, since 1957 or 61, I don't remember which one directly, a public accounts committee that scrutinizes the spending of government. You know what I'm telling you? The rule was any 3 members of the public accounts committee could scrutinize the accounts. So I think the government has either 5 or 4, and the opposition got 3. Now, the government went to the parliament the day I was sworn in. It's the first bill I spoke against. And they changed the rule to say the public, for there to be a quorum of the Public Accounts Committee, it will no longer be any 3 person. It must be 2 from the government, 2 from the opposition, and the chairman. And the government has not been turning up. And because they are not turning up, we are still auditing the accounts of the previous 2015 to 2020. So they have emasculated the Public Accounts Committee. They have removed from it its potency. In fact, right now, it is not scrutinizing public accounts. It is operating at the whims, fancies, and caprices of the government. And therefore, it cannot be a government, a Public Accounts Committee that seeks to hold the government accountable. And mind you, remember I was talking about weighted majority?
Yes.
They changed that with a 1-seat majority. If you had a proper system, then that would not have happened. And so the absence of, the presence of a bad political culture, the absence of checks and balances, the desire of the government to dominate and control have all resulted in the virtual non-existence of democracy and a democratic culture. And that's where we are here in Guyana.
Well, let me tell you, I mean, you could be describing, all you've got to say, this is exactly what is happening in Barbados. The whole music scenario where they're bringing in all these artists and we are being entertained and free food and free drinks and party and all of that. It's the same thing. They're doing it in Dominica. They're doing it in Guyana. It's a playbook. These people have studied it. They're doing it in Barbados. The Public Accounts Committee, the same thing happened. They basically they boycotted that. They make sure that doesn't happen. And so we're having trouble. That they have not even met. They can't even meet. It makes no sense because they're sabotaging the Public Accounts Committee. There's somebody here talking about it there. The Bajans who are listening to this, they're thinking you are talking about their country. And so
well, I always say it's a simple way to describe them. Thief man like light. Guyanese have a saying, thief man like light.
Thief man don't like lights. We have a
Yeah,
song
yeah,
here that says,
but
that
in
says,
Creole, Guyanese said thief man not like light.
yeah, we
Because
have
like
one
they
that
show you the thief is.
thief.
So
I was
that's why the
telling you.
Public
I'm
Accounts
sorry.
Committee has been
I'm disturbing you.
emasculated.
Repeat what you say.
Thief man not like light.
Yes.
Guyanese say thief man not like light. Translated in English, Guyanese will say thief men do not like light.
Right. Well, I was telling you, I was eager to tell you and disturbing you that there's a song that's called "Spot the Light," right? And there spot the light everywhere, and they at one stage the government station they seemed like they wanted to ban the song because the same thing as a thief man don't like light. He's saying spot the light on them.
Yeah.
But let me it seems to me, Dr. Fontaine, that Dominica has shifted or is wanting to shift towards a one-party state.
Yeah, exactly correct. That's the feeling that we get. Because when you begin to jail your opponents, when you begin to suppress the opposition, that's exactly where you are headed. And that is what we have in Dominica. I think we're already there. A lot of people believe that we are in a one-party state. I mean, and that system that we inherited, that Westminster system, the first past the post, is a horrible system. It has not worked for us. And the fact that, when we were in opposition, we had 43% of the popular vote. And even with 43% of the popular vote, they have absolutely no voice in parliament because the majority carries every single time. There is no weight given to 43% of the population. And to me, that is a problem. That is problematic. There must be a way where you have some proportional representation, where the voices of those who are not in government are heard, and that they have a say in what is going on. But it's the complete opposite. And in Dominica, where you have a wannabe dictator, someone who patterns his leadership on Hugo Chavez and who talks about being in office for until his young son can take over, is already the makings of a dictator. And that is what we have to fight against. And it's classic. So you begin by manipulating the police force. So you know that you have an armed group that will come knock on your door and drag you away, put you into prison without asking questions. That is where it starts. You take away people's voice. You take away their ability to express, concerns. And not only that, persons who support, like, for example, we are trying to build a team for elections.
Mm-hmm.
Persons who want to support us, they cannot. If, for example, a public servant expresses an interest, they're immediately targeted. They're immediately victimized, denied promotion, denied any kind of upward mobility, simply because they support the party. So you have this very systematic process where the government tries to isolate supporters of our party to make sure that they cannot speak, to make sure that their voices are muzzled. And it's only persons with some independence means, like myself, who can really offer themselves for opposition politics early on. We have to wait literally for the last month or so of elections to get our full set of candidates. Because people are just not willing to put themselves up before, because they know they'll be victimized. So yes, we are, I would conclude that we are in a very much a state of a dictatorship in Dominica.
Wow. I mean,
and that's why we fight. But we are fighting, we are not taking this line now. We are prepared to fight the government every step of the way, irrespective of the fact that they've weaponized the police force against us. They're prepared to use police, fire live rounds at the individuals, fire live bullets, rubber bullets, and so on. Irrespective of that behavior, we are prepared to stand up and fight.
This is, Barbadians, listen, this is something else, Mr. Norton. I'm so quiet listening because that is where we're headed in Barbados. Barbados, did you listen to Dr. Fontaine? Are you listening to Mr. Norton? Go ahead, Mr. Norton.
I think Professor Peter Jamadar, I think was his name, years ago, since I was lecturing at the university, pointed out that the Caribbean have what he called cabinet dictatorships. And I think we didn't pay attention to it. But there is the cabinet dictatorship. And I think we have got to, as we look at constitutional reform, find ways and means of diffusing the power so that it could be in other points rather than just in the cabinet that governs the country. I wanted to make that point.
Yes, yes, because that's actually you segue into what I was going to ask. I was going to ask, is democracy in the Caribbean truly at risk? And I'm asking based on what we've heard tonight, and though we didn't have a full analysis of Barbados, those of us who are listening, we don't have to be the leader of the opposition or a political candidate or political leader to understand what is happening in Barbados politically at this moment. And so I have to ask the question, is democracy in the Caribbean truly at risk? Mr. Norton, continue, please. Is it really at risk?
You see, we make the assumption that at some stage we achieved democracy. We never did. As I understand,
you said we never did achieve democracy.
No, I think democracy is a process. And many countries begin that process. And in that process, there are always setbacks. Some setbacks are more than some. And so you end up being kind of dictatorial. But if one thinks about, say, the minute I hear somebody say, Ghana is a democracy, Trinidad is a democracy, my position would be, Ghana, Trinidad aspire to democracy. But when you look at the happenings in the society, you recognize democracy is not an event, it's a process. And in that process, it demands a high level of political consciousness. It demands a high level of political responsiveness so that when it is seen and it is going in the wrong direction, the society needs to be politically conscious enough to rally against the dictatorial elements that are emerging in the democratic process. And unless the society arrives at that level of political consciousness and understand that protest is critical to achieving democratic objectives, then we will be lost. For us to call any one of these societies democratic is a misnomer. We are guided by constitutions that should allow us to be democratic. But there is a contradiction between the theoretical ambit of the Constitution and the practical reality. And mind you, it is easy to kill a man in the name of democracy. But then, democracy says you shouldn't take a man's life without it as part of the law. You can defend virtually anything. And mind you, another mistake people make is to assume that the law is always right. And if a society is going to emerge as a democratic society, there has to be regular constitutional change to remove the problems. Don't forget, it was the rule of law in South Africa for Black people to be treated the way they were treated because it was in the Constitution. But not because it is in the Constitution, it is right. It might be legal. It might be legal. So we have to run on two parallel paths. One of abiding by the Constitution, but two, constant review to ensure that the Constitution is in step with reality, honesty, morality, and a number of other things that should guide a democratic system.
But let me go to Dr. Fontaine. Very thought-provoking there, Mr. Norton. Dr. Fontaine, are we as the citizens in this region, or should we be worried that democracy as we know it, although we're hearing Mr. Norton's view there, should we be concerned? Is it under threat as a region?
Absolutely. I mean, what you're hearing in Guyana and Dominica, and you said in Barbados, the same thing can be said for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, Antigua and Barbuda. It is all over the Caribbean, and it's almost like the current crop of Caribbean leaders. They lean on each other, they support each other, they advise each other, and that's what is going on. So I do agree with the statement that it is under threat throughout the Caribbean region. And unless we have the same kind of changes that we've seen in Trinidad and Tobago extended, and there, I hope that Honorable Norton is successful in the election, since he's next up in Guyana, that wave can spread across the Caribbean. We can see it happen in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We can see it happen in Dominica and so on. And as it spreads through the Caribbean, we need that new crop of leaders, I believe, to emerge from the region, because the existing crop of leaders that we have simply do not cut it. And at the end of the day, as an economist, I've looked at the state of Caribbean economies. We are constantly regressing. We have failed to take care of the majority of our people. We have failed to provide in terms of allowing individuals to earn and then to build the middle class in those countries. So there's a lot of failures that we've seen. The only thing that is the same in all of these countries is this overriding desire for power and for them to remain in office. And they do that to the exclusion of everything else, quite frankly.
Wow, it's all about holding on to that power. Mr. Norton, should there be a regional electoral, like an oversight body under CARICOM? Should we have a regional electoral oversight body? I don't know if it already exists under CARICOM.
I believe they could be, but unless it comes with clear rules, you can have a regional oversight body, and the wealthy and powerful get to them, and the oversight is still skewed in the direction of the rich. The problem we have, first, elections must reflect the will of the people. And to the extent that our elections don't reflect the will of the people, they are really not democratic. Then once it reflects the will of the people, there should be good governance and the involvement of the people. You see, there's a difference between government and governance. Government is the apparatus. Governance is how you do it. And a lot of times it isn't done in keeping with law. It isn't done in keeping with democratic processes. And a lot of time, government moves in the direction of centralizing power rather than devolving power on more institutions. For instance, local government is intended to become a tier of government in which the people in the community make the decision. But then central government tends to intervene to impede that. And so, even though it is intended to bring people in decision making, it ends up becoming another layer of government that is controlled by central government. The big problem is every politician speaks to democracy, etc. But then when he or she hits power, the reality of power comes. And I believe there is one other issue that causes politicians to behave how they behave. When they get wealthy at the expense of the people, they have to worry when they are out of government. And that, to me, unless we can, I've always said all across Guyana, one of the things I'm happy about is that I cannot be accused of corruption. I've kept clean hands. I believe the minute you start to become corrupt, you will have to start to hold on to power at all costs.
Yes.
And
wow.
So
Absolutely.
there is a kind of a symbiotic relationship between clean governance and willingness to be democratic, and a similar relationship between dictatorship and corrupt government.
Wow.
I cannot agree more. In fact,
Yeah, no,
that is
but I want to hear your view as well
yes.
about this, whether we should have this regional electoral oversight body under CARICOM. But
Yes,
go right
yeah,
ahead.
I'll comment on that, but I also wanted to just that last point that was made there. It is true that one of the reasons why they remain in office is because they're so corrupt. They have incomes that are way above the salaries, and then they will have to account for it once they leave office. So how do you not account? The way you do that is by forcing yourself to remain in office, and that's exactly what it is. So the more corrupt they are, is the more they do everything to really remain in office. And the way you do that is you rig the election, you bribe, you treat, you do everything possible to stay in office.
Yes.
But with respect to the idea of this commission, I am very wary of CARICOM, and I'll tell you why. These CARICOM missions, they've been to every election in Dominica. They've made recommendations. They've told CARICOM that the elections are neither free nor fair, and yet CARICOM does nothing as a CARICOM body. They don't even hold a special session and say, let us examine those reports. They don't even reprimand the governments. Absolutely nothing is heard about those reports. So yes, we have great professionals who do their work independently, do it because, they're professionals and they do a professional work. But at the end of the day, it goes to CARICOM and that's where it dies. So I don't know if having a broad observer commission that does the elections in the Caribbean and reports back to CARICOM, whether that will hold. Unless you change the way CARICOM operates, unless you do away with this old boys club, we'll continue to have the same issues, I'm afraid.
Wow. You don't, no
But
trust
not
in
only,
CARICOM.
look, I don't
Real
believe
quick, before you go, before you comment, Mr. Norton, I want those who are listening. We have a half hour, and we want you to get ready to call in and ask these great gentlemen. I don't know if you're enjoying this like I am. I know some of you you're so caught up in listening, you might not want to call, but call in, and if you have any comments or any questions to them, please get ready to do that. The numbers on the screen. If you're overseas, you can add the number as a WhatsApp number and call us via WhatsApp. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Norton.
I was about to say I wouldn't agree with it being controlled by CARICOM.
Okay.
We have to recognize that those who are at CARICOM are at the whims, fancies, and caprices of the government that finance them. So they start by not being independent. And then when you move to CARICOM heads, there is a certain solidarity among them when they're in power. And they are not likely to go against one of their colleagues, except for strange reasons. And so one has to recognize that the power dynamics also play out in international organizations. And that, like local organizations, though the intention is that international organizations be independent, they aren't. A lot of times they depend on the state for the financing. They have to live good with the heads of state or heads of government. And so that independence is almost automatically out the window. And that is why they will come to a place like Guyana, see a recount, see so many boxes with out documentation and all the things that we saw in that last recount, but still conclude that they're certifying the elections. Look, I give people an example. I give people an example. When I was General Secretary of the PNC, after the protests of 1997-98, we invited a Caribbean team to review the election results, etc. And they did. And when they produced the report, on behalf of my party, I took the report and I went through it with a fine-teeth comb. And when I went through it, it didn't account for 70,000 votes. And rather than them saying that the elections were free and fair, or not free and fair, they sent an addendum that cater for the 70,000 votes. So here is it. You claim to have done a forensic audit. We point out to you this is short, and you send an appendix or an addendum that merely says it was catered for but left out. That says to you that in this regard, heads of state tend to, while they are in government, be comfortable and happy with those they know in government. And that also generates problems.
Yeah, old boys club, as one of you said that, but how can the citizens, our last question to you guys and gentlemen, while our viewers, come on guys, we want you to call in. I know you're eating this up, but we want you to call in and comment and make, ask any questions. The numbers on the screen, you can add the number as a WhatsApp number if you're going to call from Guyana or Dominica or people are watching from St. Martin, Trinidad. Go ahead and add it as a WhatsApp number. How can citizens? I'm listening to you all, and that's my last question to you, because I don't want to feel helpless. How can citizens and civil society force governments to implement real electoral reform?
But herein lies the problem. The very institutions that could do something, they've been muzzled, they've been decimated, they've been ostracized. So the civil society that you speak about is almost non-existent in Dominica. And I heard the similar sentiment expressed by Honorable Norton. You have a situation where it has been a systematic attempt by this government to ensure that there are no opposing voices. So you really don't have that independence.
1 second, Barbados. 1 second, Barbados. You heard that? I want Dr. Fontaine to repeat what he just said there a while ago. I hope you remember it. And Barbados, listen to what he's saying. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I was making the point that we have a situation where the civil society organizations are almost non-existent in Dominica. They've been deliberately ostracized and so on. And in fact, even in Dominica, some action was even taken against civil society in terms of having to register some kind of strange registration and so on. Government want information on them. It's almost like it's made it extremely difficult for civil society. So the very same individuals who could serve as pressure groups, they're non-existent. So a lot of the burden really falls on us, the political parties, to do something. Yeah. So what we've had to do is that we've had to go outside of the borders of the country, appeal to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, appeal to the UN Commission on Human Rights, appeal to Amnesty International, appeal to the Human Rights Commission. That is how we've been able to try to get some traction, to have those international bodies taking a view on what is going on in Dominica, because our civil society is simply not strong enough, they're not supported, and they're not encouraged.
Wow. I agree in large measure. In fact, in one of my academic articles, while I lectured at the University of Guyana, I said in it that civil society is either weak or non-existent. Now, the concept of civil society, especially the one advocated by Putnam, the Italian political scientist, presupposes that there is an independence, that these people act in their own interests and independent. Unfortunately, again, the state is the major allocator of resources. A lot of the private sector institutions don't have the kind of resources to sustain viable civil society organizations. And in case where they have the capacity, they are afraid of governments. So what has happened is that civil society has, in the Ghana particularly, is either weak or non-existent. And the role they should play as independent actors in the political system, they cannot play it because they are dependent on the political system for their own existence. And here again, I like to point out that he who controls the economics of the society in a small societies like ours are likely to control civil society, and they will not have the kind of independence to be able to take positions that allow them to be watchdogs of democracy. They become appendages of the system.
Oh, I am telling you, you guys need, you all need to write this stuff down, because I think we, gone are the days when we believe that our leaders, we have good leaders and they're going to take care of us. Our prime minister here in Barbados, she campaigned on the slogan, Mia cares. And so and some people even start to call her Auntie Mia. And when we see some of what is happening, and we listen, we see and feel the victimization. A group like ours, a show like this, they will do everything to close it down, Mr. Norton. As I said, the latest thing now is, so they now have a call, a email address that you're to email if anything is said of any maliciously about anybody. Anything that you hear that you consider it fake news, you're to report it. So we are to, in Barbados, we're to start snitching on one another. And all that is going to happen is that you're getting the citizens, you're pitching them against each other. That's what you're going to get, because they did not have their way, Mr. Norton and Dr. Fontaine, with the cyber crime bill, because the citizens rose up and took the issue to Washington. And Washington, the IACHS said, well, we can give you technical assistance to fix this legislation. Something is wrong. In essence, they're telling them something is wrong with it. Now, so what they have done is that they've decided, okay, well, we're going to try another way. And the other way is let the people snitch on each other. Oh, here's a hotline. A hotline for what? If somebody says something that's malicious, or if somebody says something that they consider it's fake. So I could come on here and say, give my opinion about something, and they take offense to it. Somebody goes and they go and tell on me. They tell on me, and we don't know, what are they going to do? What is it that they're going to do? If you go and you report me, what are you going to do? You see, but it's to instill fear in the community, fear in the society.
In Guyana's case, is not only fear, it's political harassment. You're talking about people reporting. The Criminal Investigation Department in this country and other areas have people just to monitor those programs. And by the time somebody says anything that they perceive to be out of line, the police is in front of your home.
Mr. Norton, I wanted to say that. Hold a minute. I am serious about this. Barbadians, you don't even know what you're saying right now, what the two of you have done tonight. Because the cybercrime bill, sir, was supposed to do that. And we were telling them this show would be in trouble if that cybercrime bill comes in effect. They would be at my door to take me to jail, or anybody who comes on this. So could you say that again? You have that cybercrime bill in Guyana. Tell them what happened.
I'm telling you from experience, and I should say the cybercrime bill that we have was passed while we were in government, but it was never used in the way it is being used. Its intention was to protect the state and so against cybercrime. What this government has done is transform it into a tool of repression of the people of Guyana. And so what I was saying to you is that if you make a comment, nobody has to report you. This Criminal Investigation Department here has people monitoring, other agencies monitoring. And by the time you finish making the statement, you will be in the lockups in Georgetown. And mind you, they are losing most of the cases, but they also uses it as a tool of political harassment. If they have you going to court regularly and you have to report to the police, they harass you to the point where you decide you don't want to be an activist anymore. That's the reality of Guyana.
They're basically locking up the activists. I've been watching Guyana and seeing what is happening, but just hearing it from you tonight, I want my Barbadian people to realize what is going on. They're all, trust me, they're watching the show right now. That's what they do. If they could find ways to shut down the show, and part of that is this thing to report if you hear anything that is fake or whatever. So they're going to be listening, and they've given out a number and an email address for people to reach them on. But we have a caller on the line. Good night, caller. Welcome to the Marcia Week Show.
Well, thank you very much, Marcia, and may I say good night to Mr. Norton. Oh, sorry.
Yes, it's Mr. Norton. You're correct. And Dr. Fontaine.
I was hearing him in the background. And Dr. Fontaine. And I must thank you most sincerely for the education you both provided for me tonight. But I have always been saying that, in fact, before I say that, governance in the Caribbean was born in criminal behavior. That is by the colonizers. The slave code is the foundation of law and governance, or has been the foundation of law and governance. And all that has happened is an accommodation because of the persistent rebellion, the 1816 rebellion here in Barbados. Then there was the one in Guyana with coffee and so on. So because of persistent rebellion, there have been accommodations. And I'm saying that these countries in the Caribbean have never been, they are not now, and will never be democratic or democracy unless and until we, the people, stand up and take control of our country and our destiny. And I think what is missing in the Caribbean also is a clear vision of the future. Our leaders don't have any vision. They are just in for the sake of power and the prestige of power and the benefits of power. Okay? So there is no vision in the Caribbean, among Caribbean politicians. And lastly, there is no political philosophy that is culturally relevant to the needs of the Caribbean and to African people in particular. And until we do that, we can conclude with that we have never been and we will not be a democracies, and we are not democracies. What do you, I would like to hear Dr. Fontaine and Mr. Norton comments on that.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, caller. Thank you. I'm sure you will listen because you want to turn up your device. I'm gonna put you off the call so you could do that. Thank you so much. Yes. Dr. Fontaine.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. You know, given the basis of our democracy, although I must say it is worse now than it was before, because I can contrast prime ministers in my country. Our first premier after we got associated statehood, who was the head of the current party that's in office now, when he left office after about 10 years, he had exactly $12.38 in his bank account. You know, and he really transformed Dominica. He was a people's premier. He brought Dominica up in terms of agriculture, gave livelihoods to the majority of people in the rural areas. So we've had situations before where you had governance that really cared about the people. Now we have moved away from that. And a lot of it has to do with the attraction of wealth that we've seen. Because if you look at something that's common, the commonality that we see in our leaders today is the pursuit of wealth. Is, you know, in the case of Dominica, it's about building 2 free mansions. It's about saying in a building that you rent costs $64,000 in a country where the average public servant takes home $1,500 a month. You know, so I believe that a lot of what we are seeing now is individuals who are compelled by greed and self-interest. And their focus have now moved away from the public. It's not about serving the public. It's about serving themselves and their friends and staying in office at all costs. So yeah, while the system itself is not the best, in the past we've had individuals who have worked well within the
individuals
system.
Worked well.
Because their focus was different. It was about people development. It was about looking after the interests of the public. That is now out the window. So that is the system we have. I believe that there needs to be some reforms of the system. I mentioned earlier this issue of the first past the post and just having this complete power in the hands of whoever wins, whether it's by a one-seat majority. It's as if they want every single person. We have to find a way of giving a greater voice to the opposition parties, a greater voice to those in opposition, and making it more equitable. As it is now, it is not. And we must think about this as we transform within the Caribbean region. There must be more thought, there must be more thinking about how we can better make our democracies work in the best interest of the public.
Yes, wow. Mr. Norton.
I agree with the speaker. I wouldn't say all politicians. I'd say most politicians don't outline a vision. I can say for me as opposition leader, one of the first things I did when I became opposition leader was to outline our vision for Guyana, which we call a people-centered development vision, in which we say, essentially, we will put the people of Guyana first, and rather than ensuring resources go to the families and friends of the government and the elite, we want to see it in the hands of the people. And so we have outlined a vision. But the problem is more than that. The political system in Guyana and in the Caribbean doesn't cater for post-election. Let me tell you what I mean. You mobilize all and sundry for election. Once the elections are over, you start demobilizing when you should be continuously remobilizing to execute your vision. And so what happens is people are well mobilized and motivated for elections. And when you start to demobilize them, they lose contact with the vision you put out. They lose contact with the plan. And they go into dormancy till the next election. And so you do not have a buy-in of the people in the development process. And so they end up feeling alienated by the very system of governance we have in the Caribbean. I would advocate for Caribbean leaders that, yes, elections be used as a means of mobilizing people in support of your plan, but we need to now look at the post-election period to set up mechanisms to ensure the engagement and continuous mobilization so that it can be the execution and your plan and your vision involving the people. And so this dynamic of mobilization, demobilization has to be solved if we're going to move forward in a profound way.
Yes, indeed. And just to add very, very, very quickly, you know, I do agree with what Honorable Norton just indicated. And for us as well, as a party, having observed what is happening, we have given the people of Dominica our commitment that ours is one, and that's what we have been going all over the country lately. Ours is one of a vision of shared prosperity for all Dominicans. What we're saying is then that we have put forward 10 pillars, that we call 10 pillars of development. And within those 10 pillars, we're looking to see how we can generate wealth for all of Dominica and remove that concentration of wealth in a handful of individuals at the top. Because after all, that is not what government was supposed to be. Government was supposed to be servants of the people. Now our government have become masters of the people. They want to abuse your rights, you know, throw you into jail, do all sorts of things, all sorts of abuses, take the wealth of the country as their own, build mansions overseas, build mansions in Dominica, just an abuse in the people's face. We have offered a vision that will move away from that one that will have accountability at its core, because it will be accountable to the people, one that will be transparent, but above all, it's a vision that will ensure that we have some equality within this society of ours.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, someone is asking you, Dr. Fontaine, to talk about CBI, which you touched on it a little bit, but I know this is in the Eastern Caribbean. That's a point of contention at this moment. Isn't it? Can
Yes,
you?
it is. Absolutely. Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
I will. In fact, we have taken the government to court, and we've taken the government to court on three grounds. One, that they must, all of the revenues earned under the CBI program must be brought in through the consolidated fund. That's number one. Secondly, they have entered into a contractual arrangement with a company called MMC, Montreal Management Corporation, owned by a particular individual who, since he got in that position where he controls effectively the part of the program that falls on the investments. So if you want to invest in real estate and so on, he controls those resources. He's the one that is currently underwriting the funding of the international airport. But that is our money that has gone through him. So we are asking the court to reveal the details of the contract that was entered into with MMC and the Dominica government, because we cannot understand why it is that the government of Dominica feels compelled to allow the lion's share of the CBI revenues to be held by an individual company or by an individual who, by the way, this individual, since in that position, we are told, has built 3 skyscrapers in downtown Dubai. So we're not saying that it's Dominica's money he's used. We're always saying is that those skyscrapers came into existence after he got this very lucrative contract with the government of Dominica. So we are asking the court to reveal details of those arrangements. And we are asking for other transparency issues as well, in terms of the giving an account of the number of persons who have obtained passports and the correct count, because as of now, we do not know exactly how much money we have collected. We estimate that we are short of a few billions of dollars out of that program. And so we are asking the court to intervene in this very important case. And that's coming up on September 30th, because the CBI program has not really worked for Dominica. The government has not used those resources to build up the agriculture. They have not used those resources to build manufacturing. A lot of these monies, we are told, are still kept overseas, and we have not seen the real important or the real impact of these resources in Dominica. And the vast majority of it is just used in recurrent spending to pay public servants. They have what they call a national employment program that puts young people to work on the roadside, cleaning the roads, and they pay them out of that port. So a lot of is not transparent at all. And because of that lack of transparency, we have gone to court, and we're hoping that the court will rule favorably and we'll be able to get those answers that we seek on our CBI program.
Wow.
Madam
Yes.
I'm asking. I'm running out of time. I have another engagement.
Yes, we're finishing now. Actually, we're literally 6 minutes. So this will be your final comment, and we're done. Yes.
Well, I was going to comment. I was just indicating to you I have another group waiting on me, and I have to go.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you so much, sir, Mr. Norton, for being with us here tonight. It has been quite educational. And I know you're very busy. You were at the funeral today. I saw the pictures, and I said, oh my goodness, is he going to make it? After I saw the pictures, and you were bright and early here, and I really appreciate that. And I think on behalf of all of our viewers, I say thank you to both of you for joining us. If there anything finally you want to say before you zip out,
all I would say, I'm well disposed to be on the program. And once I give you my word, I'm coming. I'm going to come.
Thank you for that. Thank you, sir. God bless you again. Awesome job. I'm going to, I know you have to run. So we're going to let you go, but bless you and all the best in the elections coming up in Guyana.
Thanks a lot.
Yes.
And all the
God
best
bless
to your
you.
program.
And say hi to Honorable Coretta McDonald for us.
I will do that.
Yes, and thank
And
you to her.
may I say this to you?
Yes.
I would not have been allowed to miss the program with Coretta.
Yes, she organized everything for us, and she's what we love her. And one of these days, I might just turn up at her doorstep. We love Honorable Coretta McDonald in Barbados, and we send all of our well wishes to her, and many thanks.
Whenever you turn up, you can guarantee a good guy news.
Yeah, okay, all right. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks a
Appreciate
lot.
that. Yes,
And
God
nice
bless.
speaking to you.
Good night. Yes.